resist temptations that could compromise your code. It can be very tough. It can be very hard to be ethical when others aren't. It takes courage to stand up and do the right thing when others aren't. Those pressures and struggles that you'll face in the business world, they'll always remain. And in hearing my story, I hope you'll be better prepared to deal with the inevitable struggles that we will all face. So why is this message relevant? Why is this message relevant to you? Well, we may watch in disbelief while others engage in crime. However, studies show that given the right set of circumstances, almost anyone can be convinced or swayed to participate in behavior they once judged others for. None of you, most of you, you're not going to set out to scheme or defraud. I didn't. Nobody's going to wake up and say, today's the day I'm going to rob and steal and steal in order to get ahead. Most of you won't do that. And most of the guys in prison don't do that either. Most of the guys in prison are a little bit like me, a little insecure, easily influenced, wanted to impress a superior, appease a client, didn't have the courage to stand up and say no. They didn't set out to scheme or defraud. But some do. Some of the men in prison have that narcissistic personality where they look to prey on others and exploit you and take advantage of you. They don't look at you as human beings, they look at you as objects, and they don't care if they ruin your family, your freedom, your life. They don't care. They are after one goal, and that is their own success, and they will use any and all in order to get there. Those are the people you need to watch out for. That's why this message is relevant. It's very important is, regardless who the leader is, regardless of who exploits or who goes along and rationalizes, I'm not doing anything that bad, you all suffer the same fate. You will be felons. You will go to prison. Prison terms are brutal. So regardless of who starts it, as the FBI agent told me when I told him everyone was doing it, he said, Justin, when push comes to shove, someone's going down. You're going down. So I encourage you to think about that when you're thinking about the people that you work with. What are your tendencies? We all have a proclivity to do something. I was a little weak. I was insecure. I didn't want to disappoint my client. And I was able to rationalize it by saying that I wasn't doing anything that bad. The truth is I had come to like the commissions. I liked the commissions. But I also didn't want to disappoint him. So what are your weaknesses? To be forewarned is to be forearmed. Those that know their weaknesses can never be taken advantage of, nor can you be exploited. Had I understood my weaknesses better, I wouldn't be standing in front of you today. The question is, will you listen? Will you listen? Philosophers from Plato till today have talked about the struggle of conveying lessons from human experience. Plato wrote about it in his famous book, The Republic, as he told his story, The Allegory of the Cave. And in that fable, Plato asks his audience to imagine a subterranean cave. A group of people had lived their entire lives in that cave. Not only were they confined to that cave, but Plato described their movements and perspectives as being restricted because they had lived their entire lives tethered to a pole behind them. As a consequence of their circumstance, the people in Plato's cave could not comprehend or fathom the fullness of life. By only being able to look straight ahead, they misperceived shadows for reality. Reflections from bouncing light rays brought illusions that those in Plato's cave felt certain were authentic. That life of limited perspective was the only life that Plato's cave dwellers knew until one of the inhabitants broke free. He escaped from the cave and emerged into all the splendor of the world. The first time he saw more than a reflection of light. Instead, he felt the power of life itself, with the sun beaming upon him, beaming and illuminating all around him. Suddenly, life was more than a collection of shadows he saw reflected on a wall. Instead, he felt the power of life itself. Upon his discovery, Plato's cave dweller returned to the cave that had previously been his only world. He was eager to share the lessons that he had learned about the world in order to help others exchange their illusions for reality. Instead of accepting such descriptions, however, Plato's cave dwellers rejected such ideas. People have a natural propensity, Plato's allegory instructs, to view the world in accordance with their own perspectives. Conveying lessons from human experience represents man's greatest challenge. That is my challenge. I ask that you listen with a bit of humility, recognize there may be some things that you need to do different. You guys aren't going to go to jail, but there could be some things in your life that hold you back from progressing, from growing. Stubbornness and arrogance. Those were my two biggest downfalls in business. It led me to fraud, distorted my view of the world. So a little bit of humility and open to recognize there may be a different way to do things, and I ask that you listen. So why did I go to jail? That's the question that I'm asked the most. When I run into somebody and they find out I went to prison, the first question is why? Why did you go to jail? I went to jail as a result of a meeting that I engaged in with a client of mine. My client ran a hedge fund. Well, what is a hedge fund? It is a product where it's exactly what Bernie Madoff did. Bernie Madoff raised money from investors, and once he raised that money, he had to house that money at a certain brokerage firm. I was the custodian. My client raised money from investors, and he then deposited that money with me at Bear Stearns and then UBS. And my client asked me to attend a meeting with one of his major investors in the hedge fund, a 90-year-old rabbi. And I agreed to attend this meeting. Knowing what I knew about that hedge fund, I never should have attended, but I did. And at this meeting, it was my client, the 90-year-old rabbi, and his 3 advisors. We sit down. I think it's going to be a nice, comfortable meeting. The advisor directs a question directly at me. Justin, do you think a 90-year-old rabbi should have $3 million in a basket of growth stocks? And at that moment, I felt like the proverbial deer that had been unexpectedly caught in the headlights. I didn't know what to say. And millions of things were running through my mind. Of course, I now know what the right thing to do would have been, which is address the troubling discrepancy. I knew as of the morning of that meeting, my client had less than $1 million in his hedge fund. So clearly, if the rabbi's advisors thought that he had $3 million, my client was making misrepresentations. But I didn't get up and I didn't address the discrepancy. I didn't get up and leave and say, I can't participate in this meeting. Instead, I tried to duck the question. I said, well, I'm not really responsible for managing the account. My client manages the money. I simply execute the trades. What you guys do is your business. I'm just here to tell you a little bit about UBS. They said, look, Justin, you're a bright guy. You're a vice president at UBS. Come on. Should a 90-year-old rabbi have $3 million in stocks? Well, I tried to duck the question, and I said, well, no, a 90-year-old guy should probably have a little bit more money invested in bonds, a little more conservative. And they said, Justin, we agree. We agree. Will you help us allocate this $3 million? And then everything was running through my mind at that time. What do I do? Now, I knew that my client had already done $100,000 a month, $100,000 in commissions that month. I knew he had done it the previous 8 months. And I knew if the account stayed alive, he would do it the next 8 months. I didn't want the commissions to stop. At that point in my career, I had grown so addicted to the money, I wanted to make more, not less. I figured if the account was shut down, my income was going to go down huge. I relied upon my client for so much business. And I knew if I did that, things were going to go bad for me. I didn't think about the client. I didn't put myself in the advisor's shoes or the rabbi's shoes thinking, wow, 90-year-old rabbi thinks he has $3 million when he really has nothing. It was about me. I didn't want to suffer and I didn't want to make less. Because as you get older and as you make more, you expect more. And I was very much a part of that. So I agreed to reallocate the $3 million. And after the meeting was over, I yelled at my client. I said, what have you done to me? Why did you put me in this meeting? What is wrong with you? And he said, look, I can make it back. Exactly what